Hello everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're going to be looking at another famous French philosopher. His name is Henri Bergson. Let's get right started. Okay, so Henri Bergson was a French philosopher whose work challenged conventional scientific and rationalistic approaches to time, consciousness, and evolution. And this is the sentence that I prepared a lot to unfold here, I think, right? Let's get started bit by bit. So, his work challenged conventional scientific and rational approaches. What does this mean? Well, he was writing in the early 1900s, late 1800s, at the start of his career, and that was when a kind of enlightenment era was in its midst, a very scientific approach, right? But he worked to challenge these kind of ideas, and he was very unique in his time for concerning ideas around consciousness and evolution, and we're going to be looking into the details into it a bit later. But at the heart of his philosophy, I think, was this idea that human experience just cannot be fully captured into a mechanical, quantifiable idea of an analysis, and he proposed instead the reality is best understood through intuition, through lived experience, and through creativity. And so Bergson really revolutionized our understanding in a lot of ways, but I think the most significant was his idea of time. So again, not a measured time, but a very intuitive time. So he decided that instead of a measured time, the external scientific representation of time that goes tick, 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 instead he wanted to use a lived time, where it is connected to human experiences, human understanding that just cannot be reduced to mathematics and numbers. And something fascinating, right? As someone more interested in humanities than math, it is a very lovely idea. The idea, all jokes aside, that we can put away these kind of mathematical, scientific, exacting approaches to something closely related to human beings is very intense and beautiful, I think. And through these ideas, he challenged just the kind of ideas at the time. He was more opening for a path to ideas of free will, of consciousness, of our human understandings, and how life itself evolves. And we'll see through his works, Time and Free Will and Creative Evolution, he really changed early ideas of psychology, philosophy, and literature. And his emphasis on intuition and dynamic changes really influenced scientific insight currently. And I think Bergson has thought he remains highly relevant today, even after 100 years later, influencing contemporary debates on artificial intelligence as well. These experience and perception and creativity ideas influencing and shaping intellectual inquiry, and also for his reward of the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1927. Okay, let's get started. So Bergson idea emerged, I think, in a time of just a really, really huge intellectual transformation. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, there was a very huge movement towards scientific rationalism and a very and a positivism, I think it is called, in which there was emphasized a measurement kind of deterministic idea, right, that dominated intellectual discussions and approaches. But Bergson was like, oh, hold up, wait a minute, I oppose that. I think, actually, that I need to critique these ideas and these ideas that all in nature, all around us, can be reduced to mechanical explanations. I don't think that's true. He instead argued that science only captures the external structure. For example, in time, it only external structure it captures. It does not account for how human beings actually experiences it. And you may be thinking, well, like who cares if how human beings are experiencing it? Like that don't matter. Well, I think it does matter. Like, in a lot of ways, I think modern society has really disregarded a lot of the humanities approach to what we take it for granted to be a scientific approach. And as I was reading into this, I at first also thought, why does it matter? Like, it's going to be different for everyone, right? But if you think about it really carefully, I think the message that Bergson is trying to give us here is that because it is different for human beings, and we are fundamentally human beings, we have to take a humanistic approach to time and all dimensions of life. We cannot just like try to explain away biological or physiological life makeup. We have to understand it as a creative process, right? And it's evolution in an intellectual sense is not a mechanical adaptation but a dynamic force of creativity, which is also called a élan vital, or vital impulse in French. And so his critiques of deterministic, very mechanical thinking resonated with a lot of existentialists, and has and all of who sought to recover the richness of human experience beyond a rigid scientific explanation. So in a lot of ways, I think he was trying to bring back the kind of personal understanding of life that was lost by the Enlightenment era, and the kind of scientific understandings. And Bergson's first major work, Time and Free Will, written in 1889, introduced one of his most influential concepts, duration, or la durée in French. This book challenged traditional scientific views of time and free will, and argued that instead true freedom comes from experiencing time qualitatively rather than quantitatively. Very interesting, right? So again, the scientific time or lived time, or la durée, is a continuous fluid experience of time that cannot be broken down into separate units. And I think in these ideas, the most famous sentence, and one that captures this idea very well, is the present contains nothing more than the past, and what is found in the effect was already in the cause. This means that real time isn't really a sequence of isolated movements, but it's really a continuous evolving, like a flow that science just cannot capture, because to science it's like t equals 0, t equals 1, t equals 2, but really to us it is a flow by which the past is soon becoming the present, and by what I imagine to be saying in the future, in a few seconds later it becomes the past, if that makes sense. So yeah, freedom, I think, is also mentioned here. It's arguing that humans are not bound by deterministic laws, again, like time, but instead of this, all actions are kind of casually determined by past events. So although like true decision making occurs in our lived time, in a non-deterministic time where consciousness flows freely, in a deterministic world freedoms cannot flow freely, right? So I think his two main ideas and concepts are very closely tied in. And creativity and spontaneity, for example, are possible because time is not a closed system. It is an open-ended and very unpredictable system in which we live. And so, yeah, in a very interesting sense, Bergson's work, directly challenging the deterministic worldview of just Newtonian physics and psychology, influenced later existentialists and phenomenologists, and even neuroscientists exploring the nature of decision-making. Yeah, and the next book we're going to be looking at is actually Creative Evolution. And I think the main idea here is élan vital, and vital impulse as well. But I think this is his most kind of ambitious work of philosophy, that took his ideals of kind of time and freedom and applied it into a biological idea, and connected it to evolution. So I think many of you may be familiar with Darwinian evolution, the idea that was developed at the time, where it was also widely accepted that in a sense it's kind of a natural selection way, right? And it's very scientific, very mechanistic. But Bergson rejected this kind of purely mechanistic process governed only by just random mutations that determine like life and natural selection. He instead said that life is inherently creative and unpredictable. So it's not a mistake in your genes, but it's something impulse vital, a life force that's ongoing beyond mere survival for organisms, that's full of novelty, full of complexity and spontaneity, and full of creativity that is a fundamental aspect of life itself. And it just cannot be set down by rigid mechanical laws or genetic determinism of both science. And he just tries to say that evolutionary processes are inherently supposed to be creative and unpredictable. And I think for Bergson, life just isn't a matter of adapting to the environment. It's an ongoing creative expression. In his most famous sentence, evolution is not the result of a mechanical adaptation of the organism to its environment. It is a result of the emergence of creative force, whose role is to introduce novelty into the world. This philosophy of creativity later influenced thinkers like Gilles Deleuze, who applied Bergson's ideas to postmodern philosophy, cinema, and metaphysics. We also have different ideas being developed into different philosophical schools of thought. And I think the most important is, as we will later see, in places like film theory and the philosophy of technology and the emphasis of creativity and unpredictability. And it just has significant contemporary relevance as well. Yeah, and so Bergson's work inspired a diverse range of intellectuals across philosophy, psychology, literature, and art. Some of his most notable influences, I think, include William James. He was an American philosopher all the way across the Pacific. And he was a psychologist who adopted Bergson's ideas on the streams of consciousness and free will. And he took the idea of lived time and tried to put it into his own psychological theories, focusing on consciousness and the importance of individual, personal, and subjective experiences and understanding the human mind. And so he had a very good emphasis on human experience, the role of freedom, and how it impacts our understanding of the world. We also have, I think we talked about Deleuze just for a second, but he used a lot of Bergson's philosophy of metaphysics, and he tried to use the creative evolution in Bergson's work and tried to bring that into his own post-structuralism ideas, using creative and dynamic forces that underlie the foundation of life into his own explorations and trying to establish a new development of postmodern and process philosophy. We also see his work impact in Marcel Proust, a French novelist who wrote In Search of Lost Time, very famous, who deeply reflects Bergson's concept of lived time and memory. His Bergson's work also later has entered debates on artificial intelligence, where questions about mechanistic thoughts and creative thought continues to dominate discussions, whether AIs should have the fluidity that humans have, fluidity of ideas and creativity, whether their mechanistic, deterministic ideas are even worth it, and especially in existentialism about human freedom and consciousness, they continue to be debated. And so I think Bergson just remains one of the most innovative and influential philosophers who try to break through the thinking of the time. I think a lot of the philosophers that I end up bringing here are people like that. And his critique of mechanical thinking, his idea of lived time, his different ideas of vital force in life, a creative force, has lasting impacts on across a diverse era and a diverse expanse of disciplines and subjects. In a era in which scientific rationalism, artificial intelligence, and determinism just dominates discussions of human behavior, I think Bergson is raising and questioning a philosophy of intuition, freedom, and creativity just remains more irrelevant than ever. And his ideas really challenges us, I think, to think beyond rationalism and mechanistic ideas, to acknowledge the experience, like the richness of life as it is lived by human beings, and recognize the role of creativity. And I think as students, we can take that as a way to continue to be inspired to become philosophers, artists, scientists, and thinkers with creative impulses who try to understand the world beyond logical and set measurements. And today, I think this is the message I want to end with. Thank you so much for watching. Stay curious, and bye-bye.